Today's story is sponsored by Carolina Trust Federal Credit Union.
Oh, there's something so real about living local, about the people and the places where we live. Just look at all the reasons why we call this home. And I'm living local. I'm living local 'cause it's where I love to be.
Hey there, you're watching Living Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel, and I'm August, Carolina Trust Brand Ambassador. Today on the community panel, we're going to be talking about Black History Month, and I have some very special guests here with me. So first I have Mr. Preston McKever-Floyd, doctor, my apologies. And I have Funnye here with us, and then Travis Overton. So we are super excited to have them here with us today and to learn a little bit about their stories. So for those of you at home who are not familiar, February is Black History Month, and Black History Month originally started in the 1920s. A scholar and historian, Carter Woodson, decided that there should be a specific time of year dedicated to celebrating the achievement of African Americans. So Black History Month actually started as Black History Week, and then in the 1970s, President Ford decided that he would expand Black History Month to the entire month of February, which is how we got to, where we are now with all of the different festivities this month. So you all have any of you been to any celebrations this month, or, have anything specific that you've done to celebrate Black History Month?
I've done several things actually, but one of the highlights of the month was visiting Charlie's Place and the Myrtle Beach Colored School.
Wow, and that's wonderful. And Frida here is with the City of Myrtle Beach. You're the Neighborhood Community Coordinator?
Yes, the Neighborhood Services Coordinator, and my role there is to help facilitate tours at Charlie's Place and at the historic Myrtle Beach Colored School Museum and Education Center.
Wonderful. And so for Frida, those at home that are not familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about Charlie's Place and what it is and kind of how it got started?
Absolutely. So Charlie's Place is a very special project to our city residents and also our city of Myrtle Beach. It was a supper club that started in the 30s, and it hosted some of the most wonderful artists that we continue to listen to today. And also it was a Green Book site that was listed in the Negro Motorist Green Book of that time era.
Wow, that's wonderful. And so, how did we kind of get to the point we are today, where Charlie's Place was, the Suppers Club, and then got to the point today where it is a place in our city that people can kind of reflect back on that history and, take tours and learn more about it?
So the actual site of Charlie's Place sat vacant for a couple of years, or a while, when it closed down. And community members came together after hearing that it was going to be demolished, and they wanted to come together to preserve that history. And it's just a beautiful partnership between residents and local government saving history. And so in 2015, the city of Myrtle Beach purchased that property. So we are where we are today because of that collaboration.
Yeah, and as we were saying earlier, February is a wonderful time to kind of celebrate Black History Month, but you can celebrate that all year round. So for people that would like to go and see Charlie's Place, what are some of your hours of operation, days a week, and then where is it located?
Charlie's Place is located on 1420 Carver Street in the heart of Myrtle Beach, one of the oldest communities in our city, which is the Booker T. Washington community, along with our other BTW neighborhoods. But if people want to do a tour, they can call our office at 843-918-1062, or they can schedule a tour on Tuesdays. So those are the days that we normally operate. But they can also call our office if that time does not work for them.
Wonderful. And I know you were saying you also visited the Myrtle Beach Colored School, and you also work with that, correct, Frida?
Absolutely. So our department, we run both sites, and we do a wealth of numerous activities and events throughout the year. If people want to continue to learn, we offer beachside chats, which is a way for everyone in the community to learn about each other and our backgrounds and our culture. And then we also offer tours at the historic Myrtle Beach Colored School Museum and Education Center. The school opened up in the early 30s, and it served African American children of Myrtle Beach. Up until that point, a lot of the students, well, all of the students were educated in the local churches, which is the Mount Olive AME Church and the Sandy Grove Missionary Baptist Church. But upon the closing of the historic Myrtle Beach Colored School in the 50s, a new school came open, which is the Carver Training School.
Perfect. And we'll learn a little bit more about that when we come right back from this commercial break. We are back with Living Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel. And before the break, we were talking to Frida about the Myrtle Beach Colored School and kind of how it got to the historic school to now it's a museum owned by the city today. So Frida, if you'll give us a little bit more information about that transition process.
Absolutely. So after the school closed in the 50s, a new school opened up, which was the Carver Training School, which actually still, the structure sits adjacent to the historic Myrtle Beach Colored School Museum. But a group of students wanted to continue the history and the legacy of that school. So they came together to organize to preserve that school. And they were successful on June 24th of 2006, where Ms. Mary Canty Goins was one of the chairpersons, and she led that charge along with other students as well. And we're where we are today because of them preserving that history. So we encourage people to come and stop in.
And I think that's super important that you mentioned that, as that people wanted to preserve the history. And I think a big part of celebrating Black History Month is making sure that people know the history, that people know, how we got from the Myrtle Beach Colored School to school integration today, and talking about, Brown versus the Board of Education. And I know, Dr. Preston, you had a little bit of insight on that, and, with you being one of the first people to integrate Conway High School, that, you have kind of a personal emphasis or a personal story to impact to the community about how important that is and knowing that history.
Yes. 1954, May 17th, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal education was illegal. I began elementary school 2 years later,
Okay.
in 1956. At that time, they built Whittemore Elementary School. These schools were called equalization schools.
Okay.
And what that was being done in the South was to prevent integration. So they built better schools.
Gotcha.
That with the facilities should be equal to what were the white schools. And so from the time I entered elementary school, we would hear talk of possible integration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't until 1965, in what we refer to as the freedom of choice era, when parents were given a choice. It really was to be given to all parents, but mainly it was given to African American parents to decide where their children went to school. And I would have been, at that time, a rising junior.
Okay.
And my parents and I discussed the idea of my going to Conway High School, which was the white school, as it was called. So in the fall of my junior year, I went to Conway High School. And in 1968, I was in the first class with African Americans. There were 5 of us who graduated: Veronica Gerald, Michael Hughes, Michael Avant, and LaVernon Owens, and myself, that graduated in 1968.
And what was that like, being, one of the first to integrate? And I guess before you say that, I do want to make the point. I think it's very important for, the people to know, like you said, that even though the Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal, was unlawful, that it took our area such a significant amount of time to really put that into place, because, from being in early grade school to, your junior year in high school, that's such a huge time gap. Absolutely. But yeah, so would you tell us a little bit more about, I guess, how you personally felt and and how that experience was for you integrating into Conway High School.
For me, and let me be very clear, that it is not the same for everybody. And the reason I'm saying that is the four of us got together a few years ago, and while I thought we had all the same experience, our experiences were very different. Now, for me, I, on the first day of school, said I didn't feel fear, I felt excitement.
And I love that you went in with an excited heart, and I'm super excited to learn a little bit more about that when we come back from the break. We are back with Live in Local Carolina Financial Friday Community Panel, and before the break we were talking to Dr. Preston about his personal experience integrating into Conway High School. And he said, not every experience was the same, but for you, you were feeling, excitement. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Much so.
Yeah.
I was feeling very excited because it was a new adventure as far as I was concerned. I probably understood the full import of this much later.
Right.
For example, the month before we graduated from Conway High School, on April 4th, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Oh, wow.
And so I refer to us as the first generation of his dream.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because I feel like you hear when you look back at stories and you think of Ruby Bridges and that kind of scenario, that you imagine that is the exact same thing that happened all over the country. So that's interesting to hear that was not your situation.
Right, and one of the reasons I must give credit, there were people in the community, black and white, who worked to assure that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just magic, it just didn't happen.
Right.
And so after Conway High School, I went on to undergraduate at Virginia State University, did a BA in philosophy, Master of Divinity from Duke. After Duke, I started teaching at Coastal Carolina College at the time. And while there, I went on and got all but a dissertation for a PhD in religion and literature from Emory University. And then toward the end of my career, I went to the University of South Carolina and got a PhD in philosophy. And much to my chagrin, I was the first African American to get a PhD in philosophy from the University of South Carolina.
Wow.
In 2009.
Wow.
And how many African American philosophers do you know? So that's kind of been my story.
And I love that. I love that, you were kind of the first at Conway, and then as you went into your higher education, you accomplished another big first and, paved the way for so many people after you. And I know you said that you were at, Coastal Carolina when it was a college, and we have Travis Overton with us, who is the current Chief of Staff at Coastal Carolina University. So Travis, if you will tell us a little bit about, I guess, your experience in higher education, and what made you want to go into work in higher education?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
And my experience in higher education actually started with my work at Middle Tennessee State University as an intern after I graduated high school.
Okay.
Little did I know that I was going to catch the higher education bug at that point, but I later did, and I joined University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, where I graduated with my bachelor's and my master's degree as part of the housing department there, working within housing. I worked with fraternity and sorority life. I worked with the gospel choir. And then I transitioned to Coastal Carolina in 2007, initially with oversight of fraternity and sorority life, and later became Director of Student Conduct and then Dean of Students. And very fortunate under the leadership at Coastal Carolina to become the Vice President and Chief of Staff in 2017.
Yeah, which is wonderful. And Travis was actually the Dean of Students when I attended Coastal, so I do remember his enthusiasm during orientation, and then, remember the relationships that he had made with some of my friends that I was very close with, and how uplifting he was to especially the African American males that I was super close with in my time at Coastal, and the impact that you made on them in that position.
Thank you for that. You know, one of my side jobs, I call it, is the advisor for the African American Initiative for Men at Coastal Carolina, which started under Pat Singleton Young, who was an amazing colleague who retired some years ago after more than 30 years in higher education, and made such a mark at Coastal that we have a residence hall named after her on campus. And so I've been able to advise that group now since 2009, and between that and my full-time job in higher education, our goal is to make sure that all students are able to come to Coastal and have a strong, fulfilling experience towards their academic degree.
That is definitely true. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us here today, and thank you guys at home for watching today's Carolina Trust Financial Friday Community Panel.
Today's story is sponsored by Carolina Trust Federal Credit Union.